Good morning, everyone. Now we are going to discuss about the second aspect of neoclassical theory of management. It comes under evolution of management, and in the first aspect or first phase, we have discussed about the classical theory of management. Now we are leading towards neoclassical theory of management. Actually, why there is a need of neoclassical theory? Because the simple reason is the classical writers like Max Weber, Taylor, Fioll, they all have neglected the human relations aspect. They have not given much emphasis over the human aspect in any of the organization. And that's was being introduced by neoclassicists. They have focused on the human aspect in an industry. We can say the neoclassical theory is the modification of the classical theory, and the importance of human factor was being recognized under neoclassical theory. There were certain experiments which were conducted, but the most important experiment was known as Hawthorne experiment. And this Hawthorne experiment leads towards the development of human relation approach. Sir Elton Mayo is recognized as the father of human relation movement because he is the person who has done all these experiments and talked about the importance of human resource at workplace. There were other prominent contributors like Rohlitzberg, Dixon, Dwyer, Levin. But the contribution of Elton Mayo was being recognized and he became the father of human relation movement. Now the Hawthorne experiment. What the Hawthorne experiment is, what are the experiments were conducted under Hawthorne experiment, what was the principal contribution which come towards with these experiments, and what was the time period where these experiments was being conducted, these we have to discuss. Actually, the Hawthorne experiment or the Hawthorne studies was a series of experiments which were conducted over Western Electric Company, USA, and the period of this experiment was 1927 to 1932. And it actually given the insight into individual and group behavior. We all know that human is very much important at workplace, and we have talked about among all the resources, man is the most important resource because he will take care of all other resources. But what makes them productive? How their efficiency can be gained? These all are a big question which need to be addressed. Now, the experiments under Hawthorne experiment were classified into four stages. The first one is illumination experiment, the second one is relay assembly, the third one is mass interviewing, and fourth one is bank wiring observation room study. Now, illumination experiments. These experiments were performed to find out the effect of different level of illumination, like the lights on productivity. That it was being studied that whether there is any impact over productivity of lighting, like if the brightness of the light will increase or decreased, does it impact over the productivity on the employee. So a, uh, there were taken a test group, and over them this experiments was being conducted. Surprisingly, what was being observed, the productivity increased even when the level of illumination was decreased. So with the increasing light or the decreasing light, productivity was increasing. So we cannot say that Yes, the when the brightness was increased, the productivity was increasing, and the lightness was brightness was decreasing, the productivity was not increasing. So it was being concluded that there are other factors also other than light which are more important at workplace to increase the productivity of an employee. Light intensity has no conclusive effect on output, and productivity has a psychological component. This was the conclusion which was made under illumination experiment. Now come towards the another experiment that is called relay assembly test room. What was being done that there were two small groups of females were created, and each group was being kept in a separate room. What was being done that time to time the changes were made, like their working hours were changed, their rest period were changed, their lunch break were changed, and there were such changes were made to these two different groups. Then their production or productivity was to be measured, the output was to be measured. What was being observed, their productivity was increased even when the changes was not made. So the conclusion made under relay assembly test room was money is important to increase the output, but not the only factor or prime factor to enhance the productivity of an employee. Now the third experiment, that is mass interviewing program. 2100 21,000 employees were interviewed over a period of 3 years. So you can see that what a long span, and how much the number of employees was. 21,000 employees were interviewed over a period of 3 years to find out what is the reason to increase the productivity of an employee. And it was being talked to each employee that what make them more productive, and they were asked to express their views freely so that the conclusion can be made. And while conducting this interview, it was being observed that importance of social factor and total work environment does matter. The last experiment was done, that was bank wiring observation room experiment. A group of 14 male workers was taken, and they were placed under observation for 6 months. See, it was being said that your pay will dependent on the performance of group as a whole. So whatever the group will perform, this particular group will be paid on the basis of the group performance. So in that case, it was being observed the efficient employee was giving pressure to the less efficient employee to complete the work, because there was a sense, there was a can say that mindset that we will receive the pay not for our efficient performance only, but we will get the pay on the basis of the group performance. So this was being observed, this pressure was being used to achieve the standards of output. Now what was the conclusion which were made under Hawthorne experiment? So the importance of social and psychological factors was being recognized, and it was said that increasing the social and psychological need must be satisfied, or it must be increased to order in order to increase the productivity of an employee. The informal relation among workers like influence the workers' behavior and performance more than the formal relation. So you can say that in an organizational hierarchy, we cannot say that there is an existence of formal relationship. The people having their informal relationship also, and actually it influences their behavior at workplace. Employees will perform better if they are allowed to participate in decision making. Belongingness, the employee belongingness with the organization, with the employer is very much important, and in that case we need to give them some say in decision making process, and they must give their freedom to express their views. In that case we can ask and we can say that performance of the worker may be increased. There was certain criticism also. Yes, we have been talked about the positive side of the Hawthorne experiment, but even we have not talked about the uh, criticism of this Hawthorne experiment. Me as a teacher or me as a researcher can see here that the Hawthorne experiment was being conducted under controlled circumstances. Whatever the experiment was being done, the people were known that they are being observed by someone. So there is a probability that they can behave in a way that can be say controlled behavior. The circumstances were being controlled. That's why there is a probability or the possibility that the behavior can also be controlled. Now the another thing is, uh, due to this controlled circumstances, the workers who were under observation, they may have improved their performance only for that experimental period. The much importance was given to human aspect, but apart from that there are another aspects which do affect our business premises or the circumstances. In that case this is one of the another criticism. And in every experiment they have talked about the freedom of the workers, so we cannot deny the role of supervisor in any of the organization. So these were the criticism of Hawthorne experiment. Now I hope everyone is clear with Hawthorne experiment. This Hawthorne experiment leads us towards the human relation movement, or can say human relation approach. Without this Hawthorne experiment, it was not possible to talk about human relation approach, because with this experiment, the Elton Mayo have recognized the importance of human relation at workplace, and since now we are actually researching that what makes a man more productive. The pointers which comes under human relation movement are, yes, the recognition and importance of human workers productivity and their satisfaction, interpersonal relationship and informal group, and cooperation among employee and employer. And these are the points and findings of human relation movement. Social system, yes, organization is said as social system and composed of numerous interacting parts. The another point is social environment. Yes, social and psychological factor do influence over the behavior of workers. Informal organization, yes, there are formal setting, but among this formal framework informal also exist. Group dynamics, the group determines the norms of behavior for the group members. The informal leader, informal leader sets and enforces group norms. So there were the need of informal leader was also being recognized. Communication, the communication must be two way because it is necessary, and it carries necessary information downward for the proper functioning of an organization, because only upward movement or only downward movement cannot make an organization functioning smooth and better. In that case two-way communication is very much important. Non-economic reward, so for the well-being of an employee, psychological well-being, non-economic reward are also important. You cannot ignore the motivation or motivating factor in any of the organization. So these were the findings of human relation movement. Now here we are ending our neoclassical theory, that is the second phase. Now in another session, we will be talking about the third section, that is called modern theory of management, that is called system approach and contingency approach. So thank you for the day.